Okay, thank you very much, Apple. And I just wanted to open, firstly, with just saying I really enjoyed those last two panels this morning. Excellent, really interesting to me. But now I'm going to be talking about wind propulsion. I'd just like to wish a happy new year. This was actually created by my wife, who's Japanese. And it's the year of the dragon boat. So it's the most auspicious year for innovation, for pushing forward. And I think we'll all agree that the industry has a really big challenge ahead in this year and going forward. So I'm going to be talking about wind propulsion. So my name's Gavin Allwright. I'm the Secretary General of the International Windship Association. So I'm an elected official. And we founded the association back in 2014. And nobody's crazy enough to actually stand to be the Secretary General other than me, I think. But anyway, so over the last 10 years, we've been developing our members, building from 12 initial members up to, I think it's now over 200 corporate and academic members of the association, and you'll see some of those listed right at the end. But this is a network of technology providers, shipbuilders, ship owners, operators, technical people, R&D centers, and academia. Before I talk about wind propulsion, I just wanted to really put it in place around the MEPC initial, or not the initial strategy, the strategy that we now have. So I know I don't have to tell you about this strategy. I know you're all very clearly aware of it. 20% reduction, striving for 30%. For 2030, reduction in emissions, based on a 2008 baseline, but remembering that 2008 was a very high level, we are higher than that at the moment. Moving to 2040, 70% reduction, striving for 80%, and then that final goal in 2050 of net zero. I don't actually like the concept of net zero, but that's a whole different presentation on a whole different day. Now, interestingly, initially, this strategy was around fuel. So the 5 to 10%, 5% of zero emissions fuel needed to be in place by 2030, striving for 10%. But we actually said to them, look guys, we shouldn't be talking about fuel, we should be talking about energy and the technologies to harness that energy. And wind propulsion is a pure zero emissions energy source. Yeah, not just greenhouse gases, but pure, there are no emissions from wind energy. Now the propulsion systems, the technology to harvest that, yes, there are emissions from that, but they're very minor. So this is now a strategy, 5 to 10% by 2030 of fuel, energy, and technologies. And we actually see that rather than a ceiling, we actually see that as the floor. We could go far quicker if we embrace wind propulsion across the fleet, and I'll talk about that obviously a lot in a minute. But to give you an idea of that, the CE Delft report, that the link is on here, was released during MEPC 80, and they took a speed reduction. We prefer to take voyage optimization, but they took speed reduction plus wind propulsion plus energy efficiency and some fuel. Yeah, the 5%, possibly 10% of fuel. And they identified that if we rolled that out to its maximum across the fleet, we could reach 28 to 47% reduction in emissions by 2030, with only 5% of that, or 10% at most, delivered from the fuels themselves. So there's a big realization that we have to be moving a hell of a lot quicker on the things that we already have available off the shelf. So what are we talking about with direct wind applications? Well, just imagine if you deliver 10 units of power to a wind turbine, then you put that all the way through your process to produce fuels, which are then burnt and then put through a propeller, you're going to get about 1, possibly 2 units of that energy out for propulsive energy for the vessel. Wind propulsion is direct. 10 units of energy in, 10 units of propulsion out, pretty much. So it's a direct use. And we've done that for a few thousand years. Yeah, the last 100 years been a little bit of a blip. Yeah, we've used a lot of fossil fuel. So, as I just mentioned, we're talking about zero emissions, zero cost. The wind energy itself doesn't cost you anything. It's delivered directly to the vessel at the point of use without mining it, refining it, transporting it, bunkering it, or storing it on board. Okay? We don't need any or zero infrastructure to push that in. Zero volatility in the price, okay? There's a bit of volatility. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow. People keep on coming up to me and saying that. Oh, God, have you thought sometimes the wind doesn't blow? Of course. And that's why, averaged out, if you're doing a wind assist vessel, you're probably looking at 5 to 20% of your propulsive energy, up to about 30%. But if you're optimizing it on a new build, primary wind, you can be looking at 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90% on some routes from the wind. We even have projects, one from MOL, which is actually looking at a climate positive ship, which actually generates more energy than it requires, stores that on board as a cargo of hydrogen stored in toluene. So we're actually looking potentially at a different paradigm. But of course, the wind propulsion technologies themselves are not free. Yeah? But there's zero development time. 13 different options are in the market today. In the market today. There's zero compatibility issues. That means if you decide to go on the ammonia route, which is very popular, I know, if you decide to go on the ammonia route or the methanol route or whatever, wind plus ammonia, wind plus methanol, wind plus HFO, there is no compatibility issue there. You can do both. Nuclear, haven't worked that one out yet, but I'm working on that. So, zero additional crew. These are highly automated systems. And zero capex, question mark. Well, it's a deck installed system. It could be leased. And actually one of our members has already just signed an agreement with Mizuho banking group to offer them leased. So you pay for it by the fuel that you save. So there is no upfront cost or a limited amount of upfront cost. And there are 7 different technologies there, which I'm not going to go through today, but I could talk about all day. We like to call that a win-win-win situation. So if you, and I know a few of you have heard me say this before, if you don't remember anything else, just remember that, and you're doing well. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things, because I've realized I've only got about 5 minutes here. We put a survey out, which included wind propulsion in 5 options to the industry and policymakers. What will be the energy mix in 2030, and what will be the energy mix in 2050. These surveys are usually done without wind propulsion included. Often is included, it's an energy efficiency measure. Energy efficiency measures don't move ships. This is a propulsive energy solution. So when we included it, it actually came out very, very well. Wind assist being stronger in 2030, but primary wind, newly designed ships coming through in 2050. But of course, this is indicative. We ran this survey, so of course we got a lot of pro-wind people responding to this, but we also got quite a lot of anti-wind responses as well. By the way, all of these ships on the right are all in operation at the moment, as are all the ships on the left. So we're actually talking, quite a lot of people say, but this must be on quite small ships. No, we've got VLCCs. We'll have a Valemax next year, or end of this year, beginning of next year installed. We've got VLOCs, we've got LR2 tankers, bulkers, Capesize, etc. So there's a lot of different ro-ros as well. And at present, we're on about, I think, 36 installations. There's been 4 this month already. There'll be another one next week. We've got 12 wind-ready vessels as well. So all of the foundation work's been done, all the radars have been moved, etc., or adjusted. And they will be installed later, possibly this year or later. So we're looking at probably having doubled the installations in the last 12 months. That looks like in a pipeline doubling again next year, and we're extrapolating out the EU has forecast between 3,700 and 10,700 installations by 2030. But that was done pre-COVID, so 2031, 2032. The UK government took that further and saw 40 to 45% of the global fleet by 2050 will have some form of wind propulsion on board. We think both of those are conservative. Now, in my last couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk about the policy side of things. Obviously, there are many levers being pulled towards higher fuel prices, more regulation involved with decarbonisation. Not one of those is enough to really push the sector to embrace wind. But collectively, they're sending a very strong message. And you'll see the S-curve on the dotted line, that's the curve from the UK and the EU forecasts going through. So as you'll see, 2025, 26 really is that inflection point. This was a thought exercise that I did about 2 years ago, and it's just been updated recently. If we mandated, if you like, put wind propulsion on every ship, pretty much all ships can take some form of wind propulsion, by 2030, the savings in fuel would actually cover the cost of decarbonisation, period. No extra charge. And that's pretty important to think about that. If we throw in voyage optimization and other energy efficiency measures which all pay for themselves, actually we can reduce the price of that decarbonisation bill. And as I said, I'm not going to go on that one. That's the innovation curve that I mentioned before. Just a couple, I've got a couple of slides, but I'm going to go off in a minute because I've got 10 seconds. Regional development in China is strengthening. France, these are all projects, wind propulsion projects in France. We have a very large cluster there. And in Finland, we're actually going to hear from one of our members, Napa, in a moment. There's a whole technology cluster there as well, which cover all of the aspects. All of these are members of the association. The barriers I'm not going to have time on. I'm going to finish this on the trends. There are quite a number of trends that are coming through. Wind ready, as I mentioned, energy harvesting. Modular applications are really important, containerized systems. And we also have the primary wind projects that are moving through. The climate positive one is on the right side, MOL. But we also have the one on the left, the NEO line, is under construction currently, 136 meters long, ro-ro that's going to be operating across the channel. And we also, sorry, not across the channel, across the Atlantic. We have the Canopé, which is actually already delivering Ariane rocket parts to French Guiana. That one is about 40% wind. This one would be more likely 80%. And just my final two slides. This is a document that's just been put into MEPC 81. So if you'd like a 175-page report on wind propulsion, which I'm sure you've all got time to read, please check this out. But this goes into a lot more detail on this. And my final slide, so I'm over time already, sorry about that. All of these companies are in the wind propulsion segment. They're either installing, investing, chartering, or designing / certifying wind propulsion systems. So my final comment is, wind propulsion isn't quite mainstream yet, but there's a huge number of mainstream players that are involved, investing hundreds of millions into this field. And I would say next year we'll actually break into that billion-dollar marketplace. So if you'd like to come with us, come and talk to me afterwards. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin.